Last week, I responded to a question that a person has been asking me for a few months, more or less an explanation of how a rational person could be religious in the face of a very, very strong, what I'll call secular sense that religion is the source of all strife between among human beings. And one can be spiritual and not religious, and what possibly could religion add to the spiritual life? And I have to say to you, it's something that I've heard virtually my entire conscious life, including my entire adult life. And very briefly, what I said last week, spent went into some great detail on it. I said last week is that when people say that religion is the source of things, I would say that we human beings can take any great idea and turn it into a perverse agent of destruction. So when people, I ask, for example, well, is atheism better? So you look at the atheism of Stalinist communism or Mao communism, or you've probably heard about the trials going on in Phnom Penh and Cambodian agrarian communism. They were the greatest murderous forces that the world has ever seen. Or if you look at nationalism, especially National Socialism, again, the greatest unleashing of evil that one has ever seen. So if one were to say, well, let's just count up the dead bodies. Okay, religion on one side, atheism, socialism, communism on the other, religion looks pretty good, right? So when people say to me, religion is the source, I say religion can't be the source. Okay, it's human beings that are the source. There's nothing inherently wrong with socialism, communism, as certainly as economic theories. If one wants to live that way, one can. There's nothing murderous intrinsically about it, but people take good ideas and they turn it into murderous ideas. Why? Because people can't stand it when people differ with them. And once one has any kind of regime that puts the idea above human rights, right? And this is why, by the way, people with good ideas scare me. Because more murder has happened in the hands of people with good ideas than anybody else. Okay? When you think about your average murder, just either an angry person or a greedy person. People with good ideas have no limits because they're so convinced of their own goodness that anybody who gets in their way, they'll murder. So there's two things that I think cause worldwide destruction. Number one, rulers who live without a basic commitment to what we might call the rule of law, human rights. And secondly, people who think their ideas are so good that they unleash the horrible power and apparatus of the state to convince everyone to agree with them, and those who don't, they get rid of. So can religions act like that? Absolutely. Is it limited to religion? Absolutely not, because it's humanity. So when people say, what's the problem with, where do wars come from? I say, it comes from human beings. So the second thing is, once we put that aside, religion is not the cause of things, it's we human beings that are the cause of things. So the next thing is, well then, can one be spiritual and not be religious? And that's obviously true. In fact, some of the most highly spiritual people that I know are people who are atheists, don't belong to any religion, and have their own private kind of religiosity. And again, when I was younger, people would say to me, I'm spiritual but not religious. I just took it at face value. And they shared with me how boring Hebrew school was. They didn't like learning all this Hebrew. They didn't like all the rituals. I said, I totally get it. I've never had a problem with it, by the way. I always liked the Hebrew, always liked services, never bothered me, never wanted to run away from it. I just loved it. So people don't love it. I said, okay. So then 10 years later, I say, so what's up? They say, I went to an ashram. I'm learning Sanskrit, So I thought you didn't like this, that it had been a foreign language. I said, well, Sanskrit is different. Sanskrit is different, right? So then I realized, well, it's not the Hebrew, and it's not the rituals, and it's not people telling you what to do. I mean, telling you not to talk for 8 hours for a Jew is a lot, okay? So clearly it's not the language, it's not the bossiness, right? So something else going on. So one thing I discovered about folks who ended up in ashrams and engaging in a life of great discipline in a foreign language, I thought to myself, well, it's interesting that they rejected religion and then found one. Okay, so I began to think that there's an intrinsic need among some people for a religious discipline, for a religious community, for a sacred text, for a theory of human nature, for a means of transformation. So the reason I think Judaism did not work out was because, in general, it's been so badly taught and so badly presented that by the time a person comes of a certain age, they're sure that there is an answer, and they're sure that that is not it. And that's what's tragic for me, is because I meet Jews who clearly have religious sensibilities, clearly know how to read a poem, clearly have an understanding of the value of religious discipline, but they can apply none of that sophistication to the Jewish tradition. They'll apply it anywhere else but the Jewish tradition. And I think the fault lies with rabbis and synagogues, squarely and clearly. Rabbis and synagogues have done a terrible job of teaching the Jewish religion for probably at least the last 100 years. Notable exceptions, I hope I'm one of them, and I know many of the rabbis that I think are exceptions, but the general rule is pretty poor. So the reason I think many Jews are spiritual but not religious is because the religion they know best has let them down. So then there's a deeper question that comes up, and that is, do we Jews and those who join the Jewish people, do we have any sense of mission to rehabilitate our tradition? Okay. And that's certainly where I stand, is in, I think, a movement in many places, across North America, South America, in Europe, in Israel, a very deep decision among many people to rehabilitate the tradition and transmit it into the future, not just to ensure its own survival, which is the most basic reason to renovate our tradition, to engage in a spiritual revival. Because if there's not a widespread spiritual revival in Jewish religiosity, not the Jewish people, we're probably some of those spiritual people in the world. Every Jew that I know is doing something. They're either in a 12-step program or with a therapist or in some other self-realization group. It's just that the last place they would go would be to a synagogue. So if we would take a lot of the spiritual energy and spiritual creativity and dedicate ourselves to the rehabilitation, renovation of our tradition, I mean, it would be unimaginably profound and transformative. But that takes a lot of people making that decision and relentlessly insisting that the religion be, or our religiosity be, transformative and beautiful and engaging and deep and creating holy community, which is, again, our vision. When Rav and I began this synagogue in 1993, that was our vision, to do it in a way that it would be all of those things, engaging, deep, transformative, building community, etc.